Hello, everyone. My name is Kristen Ingalls, and today I will be presenting on Patyon haliatus, which is commonly known as osprey. And another common name for them is fishhawks as well. So to begin, the reason I decided to present on osprey of all birds is that in the summer of 2017, I went on a family road trip to Yellowstone National Park. And on the way to see some bison in Loire Valley, my dad pulled the car over at this picturesque viewpoint over one of the many lakes, rivers actually, and he spotted this osprey nest. And immediately I was captivated by the birds. I thought the nests were huge and beautiful. And then this was only exacerbated a few days later when we were rafting in the Yellowstone River and we got to see some osprey that were actually hunting, which was fantastic to see. So ever since I have admired the birds, and I hope that by the end of this presentation, you guys will too. Okay, so classification. As I said, the common name for the bird is osprey. The scientific name is Patyon haliatus, or P. haliatus. The order is, I apologize in advance, Cryptiformes, and the phylogenetic group is Televaves. So before I got into some of the nitty-gritty details, I thought it would be useful to kind of discuss a life cycle. So if you start anywhere on this diagram I made, you can see that it's courting and breeding, and they are mated for life. And then they go on to produce a clutch of 2 to 4 eggs, average is 30, which together they incubate and hatch. I'll get more into details about that process later. Then the chicks fledge and mature and eventually gain independence from the parents. Then sometimes there's a migration to southern wintering grounds and eventually migration back to northern wintering grounds before you start the cycle over. But other times there is a direct link between once they mature, just kind of repeat the cycle because there's our species that or different populations of osprey that don't migrate. So this presentation kind of focuses on the migrating ones, but I just want to let you guys know that they do both. Some do, some don't. So that's a lot like other types of birds as well. Times and locations where ospreys are found. So fun fact about ospreys, they are found on every continent in the world except for Antarctica, which to me is kind of crazy. Like this type of bird exists literally everywhere. But most people don't know, at least not that I've met. I had to introduce it to people I know. Specifically, since we live in North America, I thought that would be good to present a picture of it. So this is their range in North and Central America. And as you can see, as I said earlier, there are some that migrate, and you can see the yellow is the migration zone. And you can see their red breeding zones in the north, which is really northern US. Here you can see in Wyoming, that's where I saw them in Yellowstone, but mostly Canada. And then they winter, the blue, down south and southern US and Central America, and even down into South America, which is why I included that. And then you have other populations in purple, like along here in California and around the Florida Panhandle area. You have populations that don't migrate, they just stay year round. So kind of got a picture of all types in this diagram. All right, ideal habitat. So suitable osprey habitat is literally anywhere where there are water sources. This includes, but is not limited to, oceans, marshes, lakes, rivers, reservoirs, and so on. The reasoning for this is because ospreys rely on fish as a primary food source, but I will talk about this more when we get to hunting. Anyway, because ospreys love the water so much and they're so dependent on it, one fun fact is that they are indicators of water quality. If there is a sudden unexplained decline in osprey population, researchers usually look at the water quality for that because they rely so much on the food that comes from the water. So if they get sick, it's kind of a sign something's going bad in there. Besides the necessity of having their water source nearby, they need a suitable nesting location. And by that, I mean it needs to be safe. So they prefer having it high off the ground, but they're not really picky about where. It can be big old trees, it can be telephone posts, cliff sides. They're not really picky. In this picture here, I put that's on top of a telephone post, I believe. So they're not really picky. They're, as long as you got water and somewhere they can have a high nest to avoid ground predators that may, like raccoons or something that may try to steal their eggs or chicks. They're pretty good. Okay, how to identify osprey. So the adult characteristics are as follows. They are long yet slender birds. They're not very bulky. Their wings are also very long, but they're not thick. They're not wide. They're rather narrow in comparison to some other species. Their coloring has a white underbelly, and then it's got dark brown wings and back. But its head is one of the most identifiable characteristics. It's all white, but it has this brown stripe going through the eye here. And that is very characteristic of osprey. If you see that, that's a very good sign you're looking at osprey. But besides that, they also have in flight, they have a kink in their wings sort of when they fly, and it looks like an M, which you can see in this photo down here. So it goes in, back to the body. I hope you guys can see my mouse. Back out and completes the M. Two other characteristics of adults, they have long legs. And this is very important in hunting, and I'm excited to show you guys what that means in a minute. And they also have yellow eyes. One characteristic that differs for juveniles is that they do have white spots throughout the dark brown plumage. And I put a picture of a juvenile down here. So these whites at the ends of these feathers would not really be there in an adult, as you can see in the above photo, that's an adult. Okay, distinguishing ospreys from closely related species. Ospreys are most commonly messed up with juvenile bald eagles and red-tailed hawks, but it's very easy to tell them apart. So ospreys and juvenile bald eagles do kind of both have that M shape in their wings that I described on the earlier one. However, the coloring of the plumage is very easy to tell here. Ospreys will always have that white underbelly, and juvenile bald eagles have a black one. The other closely related species is the red-tailed hawks, but there's a few different ways to tell this one. One, they don't have as a characteristic M. It has to go with their hunting style, and they are more white in general. And red-tailed hawks also lack that brown stripe going through the eye. In fact, so do the bald eagles. So one way you know you have an osprey is that M shape, the black, or not black, the brown wing coloring and body coloring with the white underbelly, and then the yellow eyes with the brown stripes through them. Okay, vocalization. So I'm going to do my best to try to imitate this, but then after I'm going to show you a short clip of an actual one. So they kind of do a high-pitched sequence of eeps, if that makes sense. And here I go. It's like eep, 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 eep. And now I'm going to show you the actual one. All right, so as you can see, that's much more graceful than what I did. And it is kind of that sequences of eeps, some longer, some shorter in succession. And so that's how you know you're hearing an osprey. No, I don't. Sorry, one moment. Hunting behaviors. So ospreys are very unique because 99% of their diet comes exclusively from fish. This is very strange. A lot of better birds of prey kind of see they do small mammals, different things they add in there, but ospreys do the fish, and that's one reason why their nickname is fish hawk. And so they are angulars, and the way they hunt is that they will do their soaring over shallow waters, and they circle around the shallow waters. And the reason they have to do shallow water is so one, they can see it, and two, so they can be able to get the fish. They can't go really deep in the water. They have a maximum of 3 feet penetration, but I'll get to that. So what they do is they circle, and when they see a fish, they do an aerial dive straight into the water. Their wings go up, talons out. I said they had those long, long legs. This is why. And they basically dive bomb into the water with their feet. And they have specialized barbs on their feet that hook into the fish to help grab it. And as I said, they can go up to 3 feet down into the water. Sometimes in the videos I've seen, they're completely submerged and they have to flap their wings to get out. And the most unique thing about their fishing method is that they have a 25% success rate, which is actually pretty high. That's impressive. 1 in 4, they get a fish. And so that's not too shabby. And then to eat the fish, they have sharp talons, as you can see here. And they also use the beak to tear through the fish flesh. And so I have described it so much, I only thought it was fair. I know we're only supposed to have 1 video, but it's short. And here is what it looks like when they hunt. Swooping down, feet out, wings back, bam, in the water. It's crazy. Their feathers also have this oil repellent nature to them that we talked about in class. So after they get out of the water, it helps them be able to fly. The water kind of slishes off, which is good. So now he's struggling, but he's getting out. And this must have been the 1 in 4 because he caught his fish. So I think that's amazing. I watched a ton of these videos, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. Stop. Mating behaviors. Okay, as I said earlier, they mate for life. But in order to find that first partner, the males do perform a sky dance before they mate. And in this, the male will dangle their legs as they fly. And in these legs, they will often hold either a fish or a nesting material like sticks and stuff. And they will kind of hover around the female in the nest. And then they do short little dives occasionally, like just suddenly dive. And this can go on for 10 minutes. And if the female accepts it, she will accept whatever they had, build it to the bulky nest. They build these really bulky nests, as you can see in the picture I took. Fun fact, the nest, they return to the same nest every year, so they can get as high as 10 feet because they just keep adding to it. And then according to Brookhead and Lessels in 1988, they copulate an average of 160 times per clutch, and 39% of the copulations result in colloquial contact. Fun fact. Parental care. So the female will lay 2 to 4 eggs, as I said. 3 is the average that end up being laid. The incubation period is of 1 month. During this time, the female is the primary incubator. The male primarily protects the nest from different predators and provides food for the female. The chicks hatch, and after they hatch, they have 2 months of growth where the parents provide for them. Both the male and female will switch off. And then they will fledge at the end of that 2-month period. And then in an additional 2 months, the chicks become independent from the parents. And so they don't follow, if they're migratory birds, they don't follow their parents back that first migration. It's all instinct, which I find really crazy. So they just know where to go instinctually. So that may be something we talked about in class, with maybe them sensing something with the magnetism of Earth or something like that. But I don't know. Here are some interesting facts. Ospreys always carry the fish face first, which is believed to help with aerodynamics. When they catch a fish, it's always the head facing the same way the bird's head is. There are both migratory and non-migratory populations of ospreys. Ospreys return to the same nest each year and continue to build upon it. The tallest recorded nest has been over 10 feet, which is kind of crazy. Ospreys make their first migrations alone. They are guided by instinct. Females ospreys tend to be larger than males. And some Native American tribes view ospreys as medicine birds. So they think if you have a vision or a dream of ospreys, you will be granted with spiritual healing powers. That's cool. Lastly, how are ospreys doing? Well, historically, they have faced many threats, mainly the DDT eggshell thinning, which is the same threat that the bald eagles encountered that many of us have heard before. So osprey populations experienced sharp declines from the 1950s to the 1970s. This was because a chemical pollutant known as DDT was in the water, and it underwent macroaccumulation in aquatic organisms and ended up in fish and eventually ospreys. This chemical caused eggshell thinning. So although birds would lay eggs, they would not come to term, so to say. The bird would end up crushing them because they were so thin. And so obviously, knowing birds, population fell. However, luckily in 1962, Rachel Carson published Silent Spring and launched the environmental movement. Some of the accomplishments of her launching of this movement was putting ospreys and other birds on the endangered species list. It was the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and the banning of DDT use in America. So today, also Watson Paxton in 2007 did have some other possible threats to osprey populations, these being human activity, and by what this meant was overfishing of the water sources and/or disturbance of nest sites. So if maybe humans scared off some osprey from the nest and then they weren't able to incubate the eggs and the eggs never hatched. But they were inconclusive in the data in this, but I thought it was interesting, so I included it. So today there is no big threats. The population has been holding steady and steadily increasing since that downfold in the 1970s. But something to keep in mind is always human involvement, human activity, maybe us limiting their range or their food source or disturbing them. It's always something to keep an eye on. All right, so thank you. This concludes my presentation on ospreys. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something that you didn't know before, something about these majestic creatures. If anyone has any questions or you would like to know more, feel free to email me at kengels@umich.edu. But besides that, it's been a pleasure. And here is my works cited. Sorry.